Captain Lee Minho stood on the observation deck of the defense station, watching the golden sunrise paint the fields of New Busan in warm light. The farming colony stretched out below him like a green blanket, dotted with small houses and barns. Smoke rose from chimneys as families started their day. Children's laughter carried on the morning breeze as they ran to catch the school transport. It was hard to believe his grandparents had lived through the old wars. The stories they told seemed like myths now, tales of massive fleets, planet-killing, weapons, and battles that lasted for years. Here on New Busan, the biggest concern was whether the harvest would be ready before the rainy season started. Minho adjusted his uniform and walked toward the medical center. His weekly meeting with Dr. Kim Yuna was more social than official these days. The colony had been peaceful for so long that most of his duties involved helping farmers move equipment or mediating disputes over land boundaries. He found Yuna in her office, reviewing health reports on her tablet. She looked up and smiled when he entered. Her black hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her white coat was clean except for a small stain from helping deliver a calf that morning. "Good morning, Captain," she said, setting down the tablet. "Another quiet week to report. 3 cases of seasonal flu, 1 broken arm from a boy who thought he could fly off the barn roof, and Mrs. Song's baby is teething and keeping the whole neighborhood awake." Minho laughed and sat down across from her desk. "Remember when our biggest worry was whether the defense grid was working properly? Now I spend more time helping people fix their tractors than checking weapon systems." Yuna nodded thoughtfully. "My grandmother used to tell me about the medical ships during the consolidation wars. Mobile hospitals that could treat thousands of wounded soldiers, field surgery under enemy fire, combat medics who carried weapons alongside their medical supplies." She gestured around her peaceful office. "I trained for emergency medicine, but the most serious injury I've treated was when Farmer Kim cut his hand on a harvester blade." "Do you ever wonder if we've gotten too comfortable?" Minho asked. "The Defense Force spends most of its time on disaster relief and helping with heavy lifting. Half my men have never fired their weapons except at the practice range." "Is that such a bad thing?" Yuna replied. "Would you rather go back to the old days? War fleets and battle stations?" Before Minho could answer, his communication device beeped. It was Sergeant Park from the main gate. "Captain, we have visitors. The Choi family is here for the birthday celebration setup. Should I send them to the community center?" "Let them through," Minho said into the device. Then he looked at Yuna. "Daiho's 10th birthday party is today. The whole colony is invited." They walked together toward the community center, a large building at the heart of New Busan. The structure had been built by the first settlers 10 years ago and served as meeting hall, celebration space, and emergency shelter during bad weather. Today it was decorated with colorful streamers and balloons. Choi Wonbin was directing the setup with the enthusiasm of a man who rarely had reason to celebrate. His wife had died in a transport accident 2 years ago, leaving him to raise Daiho alone. The boy was his whole world now. "Captain! Doctor!" Wonbin called out when he saw them approaching. "Thank you for coming early to help." Daiho ran up to them, his face bright with excitement. He was a small boy for his age, but his eyes were sharp and curious. "Captain Minho, will you tell everyone the story about the old defense ships?" "Which story is that?" Minho asked, though he knew exactly which one the boy meant. "The one about how they used to hide weapons inside cargo ships, and how merchant vessels could turn into warships in space battles. Dad says those are just stories. But you were in the academy. You know if they're real." Minho exchanged a glance. with Wanbin, who shrugged apologetically. He's been reading the history files again. I keep telling him those old war stories aren't suitable for children. They're not just stories, Minho said carefully. But those days are long past. We don't need hidden weapons or secret warships anymore. We have peace. More families began, arriving for the celebration. Old Park Hagen came with a basket of fruit from his famous orchards, the same trees that now provided fresh food to 3 different star systems. The elderly man had been among the first settlers and had seen New Busan grow from empty grassland to a thriving community. "Birthday boy!" Hagen called out, handing Daeho a perfectly ripe apple. "Try this, new variety I've been working on, sweeter than the old earth apples, but grows twice as fast." As the celebration got underway, Minho found himself relaxing. This was what humanity had built with their peace. Families, communities, children who could grow up without fear of war. The defensive systems around New Busan were mostly automated now, quietly scanning space for threats that never came. The party was in full swing when Wanbin called for attention. He stood at the front of the room holding a wrapped package. "Daeho, come here. Time for your father's gift." The boy rushed forward eagerly. Inside the package was a small farming tool, designed for a child's hands but made with the same quality as adult equipment. It was polished metal with a wooden handle carved with the boy's name. "This belonged to your grandfather," Wanbin said, his voice thick with emotion. "And his grandfather before him. It's for building, not destroying, for growing things instead of tearing them down. That's what we do now, son. We build." Daeho held the tool carefully, understanding that this was more than just a gift. It was a symbol of what his family chose to be. Farmers, builders, people who made things grow. The celebration continued late into the evening. Children played games while adults shared food and stories. Dr. Yuna helped serve cake while Captain Minho organized a game of hide-and-seek that had half the colony laughing. As the crowd began to thin out, Minho stepped outside for some fresh air. The twin moons of New Busan were rising, casting silver light across the peaceful settlement. In the distance, he could see the gentle glow of the automated defense grid, a nearly invisible barrier that protected them from space debris and the occasional asteroid. "Beautiful night," said a voice behind him. He turned to see Park Hagen approaching, moving slowly but steadily despite his age. "It is," Minho agreed. "Nights like this make you grateful for peace." Hagen nodded, looking up at the stars. "I remember when those stars meant danger, when any ship appearing on the sensors could be carrying death. Now the only ships that visit us bring seeds and farming equipment." "Do you miss those days?" Minho asked. The old man was quiet for a long moment. "I miss the certainty," he said, finally. When the enemy was clear and the choices were simple, fight or die, win or lose, now. He gestured at the peaceful colony around them. "Now we have to trust that everyone else wants peace as much as we do." "And if they don't?" Hagen's eyes grew distant. "Then we remember what we chose to forget. But let's hope it never comes to that." Unknown to the celebrating colonists, high above their world, sensors were recording every detail of their peaceful evening. Vorthon scout ships, invisible to human detection systems, mapped the colony's defenses and noted the positions of important buildings. They counted the number of armed defenders and cataloged the types of weapons visible. War Prime Thekvar reviewed the data from his command ship at the edge of the system. The humans appeared even weaker than intelligence reports suggested. Their defense grid was minimal. Their military presence was almost non-existent. Most telling of all, they wasted resources on celebrations and sentiment instead of proper military preparation. They make themselves vulnerable with their emotions, Tekvar told his subordinates. They gather in large groups. They care more about their offspring than strategic advantage. This weakness will be their downfall. The Vorthan ships began transmitting coordinates back to the main fleet. New Busan would be the perfect target for their demonstration, a thriving colony with minimal defenses and maximum emotional impact. When the humans saw what happened to their precious farmers and their children, they would understand that the galaxy belonged to the strong. On the surface, the birthday celebration wound down peacefully. Families returned to their homes. Children fell asleep clutching party favors, and the community center was cleaned and locked for the night. Captain Minho made his final security rounds, checking systems that hadn't detected a threat in years. In his small house at the edge of the settlement, young Daeho placed his new farming tool on the shelf next to his bed. Through his window, he could see the lights of other homes scattered across the valley. Each light represented a family, a life built on the promise that tomorrow would be as peaceful as today. None of them knew that tomorrow would change everything, that the peace they had built so carefully was about to be shattered by those who mistook kindness for weakness, that the galaxy was about to learn the difference between humans who chose not to fight and humans who were no longer making that choice. The calm before the storm was ending. But on New Busan, families slept peacefully under the stars, dreaming of harvests and birthdays and all the small joys that made life worth living. They would have this one last night of innocence, before the universe reminded them what they really were. The attack began at dawn, just as the first farming crews were heading to the fields. Captain Minho was drinking his morning coffee when the emergency alarm started screaming. The sound was so unfamiliar that for a moment he thought it was a malfunction. The defense station hadn't used the attack warning in over 8 years. He ran to the control room still in his sleep clothes. Sergeant Park was already at the sensors, his face pale with shock. "Captain, we have multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace," Park said, his voice shaking. "At least 50 ships, maybe more. They're not responding to our identification requests." Minho looked at the display screen. Red dots were appearing all around New Busan, forming a perfect attack formation. These weren't merchants or explorers. These were warships. "Sound the colony alert," Minho ordered. "Get everyone to the emergency shelters and send a message to Earth. Tell them we're under attack." Before Park could respond, the first explosions lit up the morning sky. The Vorthan ships struck without warning or demand for surrender. Their weapons tore through the automated defense grid like it was made of paper. The small orbital platforms that protected New Busan from asteroids and space debris were destroyed in seconds. In the community center, where Daeho had celebrated his birthday just 12 hours earlier, families were running toward the emergency exits. Dr. Yuna was trying to organize the evacuation when a blast wave shattered all the windows. Glass flew everywhere as people screamed and dove for cover. "This way!" she shouted, leading a group of children toward the reinforced basement. "Stay together! Keep your heads down!" Outside, Choi Wanbin was running toward his house when he saw the alien ships descending from the sky. They were unlike anything he had ever seen, angular and sharp, like flying crystals covered in weapons. They moved with deadly purpose, targeting not just military buildings, but homes, schools, and farms. "Die-ho!" he called out, fighting through the crowds of panicking colonists. "Die-ho! Where are you?" At the defense station, Captain Minho was trying to coordinate a response with only 12 soldiers and equipment designed for police work, not war. Their weapons were meant for stopping criminals, not alien warships. "Sir, they're jamming our communications," Sergeant Park reported. "I can't reach Earth or any of the other colonies." "What about our weapons?" Minho asked. "The orbital defense platforms are gone. We have small arms and 3 atmospheric fighters against 50 alien warships." Minho felt his stomach sink. The fighters were training vehicles, barely armed. They had never expected to face a real military force. The Vorthan ground assault began within minutes. Dropships landed in the main square, and alien soldiers poured out. They were tall and insect-like, with crystalline armor that reflected the morning sun. Their weapons made a horrible shrieking sound when they fired, but what made Minho's blood freeze was what they were targeting. Not the defense station, not military personnel. They were going after the civilians. Wanbin found his son hiding under their kitchen table, clutching the farming tool he had received for his birthday. The boy's eyes were wide with terror as explosions shook their small house. "Dad, what's happening?" Daeho whispered. "I don't know, son. But we need to get to the shelters." Wanbin picked up his son and ran toward the door. Outside, he could see other families doing the same thing, carrying children and helping elderly neighbors. Old Park Hagen was in his orchard when the Vorthan soldiers found him. He was trying to help a group of children who had gotten separated from their parents. The alien creatures surrounded them, weapons raised. "Please," Hagen said, stepping in front of the children. "They're just babies. Take me instead." The lead Vorthan tilted its head, studying the old man. Then it spoke in broken human language, its voice like grinding glass. "Humans too weak, too soft. This is lesson for your species." The weapon fired, and Park Hagen fell. The children screamed as the aliens moved forward. Dr. Yuna had managed to get 30 people into the community center's emergency shelter when she heard the explosions getting closer. The basement was designed to protect against natural disasters, not military weapons. She could hear the building above them being torn apart. "Everyone stay calm," she said, though her own hands were shaking. "Help is coming." But she didn't know if that was true. Through the small emergency radio, all they could hear was static and distant screams. Captain Minho and his remaining soldiers had taken position in the defense station, but they were fighting a losing battle. The Vorthan weapons cut through their barriers like they weren't there. One by one, his men were falling. "Captain," Sergeant Park called out, blood running down his face from a head wound. "I got one message out before they jammed us completely. Earth knows we're under attack." "How long until help arrives?" Minho asked, firing his rifle at a group of aliens advancing down the corridor. "Unknown, sir. Could be days. Days they didn't have." Already, Minho could see fires burning across the colony. The aliens weren't just attacking military targets. They were systematically destroying everything humans had built here. Wanbin and Daeho had made it halfway to the emergency shelter when a Vorthan patrol spotted them. The aliens moved with frightening speed, cutting off their escape route. "Run, Daeho!" Wanbin shouted, pushing his son behind a damaged transport vehicle. "Get to the shelters!" The boy ran, tears streaming down his face, still clutching his birthday gift. Behind him, he heard his father's voice raised in defiance, then the sound of alien weapons. When the main assault ended 3 hours later, New Busan was in ruins. The Vorthons had destroyed every major building, killed thousands of civilians, and captured hundreds more for reasons that became clear only later. War Prime. Thekvar stood in the wreckage of the community center, studying the human survivors who had been brought before him. They were dirty, injured, and terrified, but still trying to protect each other. Even now, he saw adult humans putting themselves between his soldiers and the human children. "Your species disgusts me," he told them in his grinding voice. "You fight with emotion instead of logic. You care more about your weak offspring than strategic victory. This is why you will lose." Dr. Yuna, her medical coat torn and bloody, stepped forward. "Why are you doing this? We never threatened you. We're farmers, not soldiers." "Exactly," Thekvar replied. "You should be soldiers. You should be conquerors. Instead, you waste your time growing plants and raising children. The galaxy belongs to the strong, not the weak." He gestured to his soldiers, who began separating the survivors into groups. "You will come with us. Your government will learn what happens when they allow their people to be soft. When they see what we do to you, they will surrender their other colonies without a fight." Captain Minho, barely alive and held up by 2 Vorthon soldiers, managed to speak. "You don't understand humans at all." "I understand weakness," Thekvar said. "And that is all I see here." As the survivors were loaded onto Vorthon transport ships, young Deho was found hiding in the ruins of his family's house. The aliens dragged him out, and he was still holding the farming tool his father had given him. A Vorthon soldier tried to take it away, but the boy held on with desperate strength. "It's all I have left," he whispered. The alien let him keep it, perhaps thinking it was amusing that a human child would cling to a farming tool in the face of conquest. Dr. Yuna was placed in the same transport as Deho. She put her arm around the traumatized boy, trying to offer what comfort she could. Around them, other survivors did the same, still taking care of each other even in the face of horror. Before the transports lifted off, War Prime Thekvar made his message to humanity. Standing in the ruins of New Busan, with smoke rising from burning homes behind him, he spoke into a recording device. "Humans of Earth and the colonies," his voice scraped like metal on stone. "This is what your weakness has earned you. Your people on New Busan are now our prisoners. They will remain so until you surrender all your colony worlds to the Vorthon Empire. Resist, and they will suffer. Send your warships, and they will die. This is the price of being soft in a galaxy ruled by the strong." The recording was transmitted on all human frequencies before the Vorthon fleet departed, taking 847 survivors with them. Behind them, New Busan burned. In the ruins of Park Hajin's orchard, a few fruit trees still stood among the wreckage. The old man's body lay beneath them, surrounded by the children he had died trying to protect. His blood had soaked into the soil that had grown food for 3-star systems. The colony that had celebrated a child's birthday with joy and laughter was gone. In its place was a wasteland of broken dreams and shattered families. The Vorthons had made their point about human weakness. What they didn't realize was that they had just made the worst mistake in their species' history. They had attacked human families. They had murdered human children. They had taken human prisoners for torture and experiment, and humanity was about to show them the difference between choosing to be peaceful and being unable to fight back. The message from New Busan reached Earth 18 hours after the attack. Admiral Kang Tae-hyun was in his office at Fleet Command when the emergency alert came through. He had been reviewing routine supply reports. the kind of peaceful paperwork that had filled his days for the past decade. The first transmission was brief and broken. Captain Minho's voice filled with static and background explosions. "Earth Command, this is New Busan Defense. We are under attack. Multiple alien warships. They're targeting civilians. Send help. Send..." Then silence. Admiral Kang stared at the communication device for a long moment. Attack? On a farming colony? It had been so long since anyone had dared strike at human settlements that the emergency protocols felt foreign. He pressed the priority alert button. Within minutes, his staff was assembled in the command center. General Park Soo-jin arrived still wearing her exercise clothes, having run directly from the training facility. Colonel Yoo Jin-soo came with his breakfast still in his hand. "What do we know?" General Park asked, looking at the tactical display. "At 0600 colony time, New Busan came under attack by unknown alien forces," Admiral Kang replied. "We lost contact after the initial message. Long-range sensors show massive energy discharges in that system." "Could be a mistake," Colonel Yu suggested. "Maybe a mining accident or equipment malfunction." Admiral Kang shook his head. "I've listened to the recording 6 times. That was weapons fire in the background, and Captain Minho said they were targeting civilians." The room fell silent. Everyone present had served in the military for decades, but they had never faced a situation like this. The last major conflict involving humans had ended before most of them were even born. "What are our response options?" General Park asked. "That's the problem," Admiral Kang said grimly. "Under current military doctrine, we have 3 patrol ships in that sector against an unknown number of alien warships." The truth was that humanity's military had become something different over the decades of peace. Ships designed for patrol and rescue work, soldiers trained for disaster relief and colony support, weapons that hadn't been fired in anger for a generation, or so it appeared on the surface. President Jin Yunji arrived at Fleet Command 2 hours later. She was a small woman in her 50s, known for her calm demeanor and skill at diplomatic negotiations. Today, her face was stone cold. "Show me everything," she said without greeting anyone. They played the recording from New Busan. They showed her the sensor data indicating massive destruction in the colony system. Most damning of all, they played the Vorthon message that had been transmitted across all human frequencies. "War Prime." Thekvar's grinding voice filled the command center. "This is what your weakness has earned you. Your people on New Busan are now our prisoners. Surrender all your colony worlds to the Vorthon Empire, or they will suffer." President Jin listened to the entire message without speaking. When it ended, she was quiet for a long time. "How many people lived on New Busan?" she asked finally. 50,000, Madam President," Admiral Kang replied. "Mostly families, children." "And how many survived?" "Unknown. The aliens claim to have taken prisoners, but we don't know how many." President Jin nodded slowly. Then she spoke words that hadn't been heard on Earth for 80 years. "I'm calling an emergency session of the Human War Council." The War Council chamber was deep underground, beneath Fleet Command headquarters. It was a room that most people had forgotten existed. The last time it had been used was to formally end the Terran Consolidation Wars and establish what historians called the Long Peace. The council consisted of 7 members: the President, the Fleet Admiral, the Army General, the head of Colonial Defense, the Minister of Defense, the head of Human Intelligence, and 1 member whose identity was classified. General Park took her seat at the ancient table, looking around at the dusty chamber. "I never thought I'd see this room used for anything except historical tours." None of us did, President Jin replied. But circumstances have changed. The seventh member entered last. He was an elderly man in a simple gray uniform with no rank, insignia. Most of the council had never seen him before, though they knew he existed. He was listed in the records only as Special Projects Director, Dr. Lim Ji-ho, he said, introducing himself. I manage certain legacy systems. President Jin called the meeting to order. We are here because human civilians have been attacked and taken prisoner by an alien force calling itself the Vorthon Empire. They demand we surrender our colonies or face continued attacks on our people. What do we know about these Vorthons? Asked the intelligence minister. Very little, Admiral Kang admitted. They appeared from outside our explored territory. Their ships use technology we don't recognize. They seem to believe humans are weak because we focused on peaceful expansion. Are we weak, President? Jin asked bluntly. The question hung in the air. Everyone at the table knew the official answer. Humanity had transformed itself into a peaceful, exploring, farming civilization. Their military was small and focused on defense and disaster relief. Dr. Lim cleared his throat. May I speak plainly, Madam President? Please do. The Vorthons have made a fundamental error in judgment. They've confused our choice to be peaceful with an inability to wage war. They don't understand that we didn't become farmers because we forgot how to fight. We became farmers because we were too good at fighting. General Park leaned forward. What do you mean? The consolidation wars ended not because we ran out of enemies, but because we became frightened of ourselves. Our weapons became too powerful, our tactics too brutal. We decided that total war was too dangerous to ever use again. The sleeping fleet, Admiral Kang said quietly. Dr. Lim nodded. Among other things, we didn't disarm after the last war. We just went to sleep, turned our warships into cargo haulers and colony transports, converted weapons factories to farm equipment production, trained our soldiers to be disaster relief workers. But the conversions were always designed to be reversible. President Jin stood up and walked to the far end of the chamber. On the wall was a sealed panel marked with warnings in dozens of languages. She placed her hand on a scanner next to it. Authorization required for military code Broken Arrow, the computer announced. President Jin Yunji, authorization code Alpha 77 Delta 9. Confirmed. Admiral Kang Tae-hyun, please provide secondary authorization. Admiral Kang joined her at the panel. Admiral Kang Tae-hyun, authorization code Omega 35 Charlie 1. Confirmed. Dr. Lim Ji-ho, please provide final authorization. Dr. Lim walked slowly to the panel. His hand shook slightly as he placed it on the scanner. Dr. Lim Ji-ho, authorization code, God forgive us all, Zulu 99 Alpha 7. Authorization. Confirmed. Military protocol Broken Arrow is now active. May heaven have mercy on your enemies, because you will not. The panel slid open, revealing a single red button. President Jin looked around the table at the other council members. By activating Broken Arrow, we are suspending the peaceful expansion. Accords! We are authorizing the conversion of all civilian assets to military configuration. We are waking up the sleeping fleet, and we are opening the arsenal. She paused. This means total war, not the limited conflicts of the past century, but the kind of war we swore we would never fight again. The colonies deserve to be protected, General Park said firmly. The children on New Busan deserve to be protected too, Admiral Kang added. We failed them. We won't fail the others. President Jin pressed the button. Across human space, automated systems that had been dormant for decades suddenly came online. On Earth, massive factories that had been producing farming equipment for 50 years began retooling themselves. The AI conversion would take less than 24 hours. In orbit around Mars, the sleeping fleet began to wake up. Ships that appeared to be cargo haulers and colony transports started revealing their true nature. Weapon systems emerged from hidden compartments. Military-grade shields powered up. Engines designed for war, not commerce, began to burn with deadly fire. Captain Oh Min-seok was commanding what appeared to be a grain transport ship near the Jupiter. System when his ship's computer announced, Military Protocol Broken Arrow activated. Beginning wartime conversion. Estimated time to completion, 6 hours. He had been expecting this message his entire career, but had hoped never to hear it. Around him, his crew moved with practiced efficiency, converting their merchant vessel back to its original configuration as a heavy battle cruiser. On the colony world of New Seoul, factories that made farming tools began producing rifles. Medical supply plants started manufacturing combat drugs. Even the schools were equipped with hidden armories that unlocked as soon as Broken Arrow was activated. Commander Yu Ji-won received her orders while inspecting what everyone thought was an agricultural support station. The message was simple. Report to Battle Group 7 for immediate deployment against hostile alien forces. Your cover identity is no longer required. She smiled grimly. After 20 years of pretending to coordinate crop shipments, she was finally going back to her real job, hunting down humanity's enemies and destroying them completely. The transformation was happening everywhere. Merchant pilots revealed they were combat veterans. Farming colony administrators turned out to be military strategists. Even the civilian government officials had hidden military training and authorization codes. Dr. Lim stood in a secure facility on Mars, watching blast. Doors open that hadn't moved in 80 years. Behind them lay humanity's collection of weapons that had been deemed too dangerous for civilized warfare. Planet crackers, star killers, weapons that could turn gas giants into suns or freeze entire solar systems. I hoped we'd never need these. Again, he told his assistant. The Vorthans attacked children, the assistant replied. They wanted to see what happens when you hurt human families. Now they'll find out. Back on Earth, President Jin addressed the human colonies via emergency broadcast. Her message was simple and direct. Citizens of human space, our people on New Busan have been attacked by alien forces. Thousands are dead. Hundreds have been taken prisoner. The attackers believe we are weak because we have chosen peace over war. They are about to learn the difference between being unable to fight and choosing not to fight. All civilian assets are being converted to military configuration. All colonies are to implement Defense Protocol 7. The sleeping fleet is awake. Heaven help our enemies, because we will not. The galaxy was about to discover what humanity really was beneath their peaceful facade. And the Vorthans, who thought they had crushed a farming colony full of weak civilians, were about to face the most dangerous predator species that had ever evolved. The sleeping giant was stirring. And when it fully woke up, the universe would remember why humanity had chosen to sleep in the first place. The first sign that something had changed came when human merchant ships started disappearing from trade routes across the galaxy. Not destroyed or captured, simply gone, as if they had never existed. The Altarian Trade Council noticed it first. Their shipping coordinator, a blue-skinned alien named Vextor, was reviewing transport schedules when he realized that 17 human cargo vessels had failed to arrive at their destinations. Strange, he muttered to his assistant. Humans are usually the most reliable traders in the galaxy. They never miss deliveries. What Vextor didn't know was that those 17 ships were currently racing toward Vorthon space at speeds no merchant vessel should have been able to achieve. Their cargo holds, which yesterday had contained grain and farming equipment, now housed weapons that could level entire cities. Commander Yu Jiwan stood on the bridge of what the shipping manifests, listed as the Peaceful Harvest, a bulk grain transport. The bridge looked the same as it had for 20 years. Plain metal walls, basic navigation equipment, worn seats that had seen countless boring cargo runs. But appearances were deceiving. Behind hidden panels, military-grade tactical displays were coming online. The ship's true identity was finally being revealed. The UHS Righteous Fury, a Devastator-class heavy cruiser that had been sleeping under a merchant ship disguise for 2 decades. "Status report," Commander Jiwan ordered. "Weapon systems at full capacity," reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Kim Woo-jin. "Shields charged. Stealth systems active. All crew members have completed transition from civilian to military protocols." "How long until we reach the first Vorthon outpost?" 6 hours, Commander. Jiwan nodded. Her orders were simple. Find Vorthon military targets and destroy them completely. No survivors, no witnesses, no ships escaping to warn others. The Vorthons wanted to see human weakness. Instead, they were about to see human war. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. Captain Park Jun-ho's agricultural equipment hauler was actually a carrier loaded with fighter bombers. Captain Lee Seokmin's medical supply transport carried enough firepower to crack a moon in half. Hundreds of ships that had spent decades pretending to be peaceful merchants were revealing their true nature. The Vorthans, meanwhile, were celebrating their easy victory. War Prime Tekvar had returned to the Vorthon military station at Kepler 442, a fortified asteroid base that controlled 3 star systems. The station was carved deep into a massive rock and protected by energy shields and automated weapons. "The fear. Humans are even weaker than we thought," Tekvar told his subordinates. "Their colony offered almost no resistance. Their defense force was pathetic. I expect them to surrender their remaining colonies within days." Sub-Commander Veltok, his second-in-command, seemed less certain. "War Prime, our scouts report unusual activity in human space. Their merchant ships have stopped following normal trade routes." "Fear," Tekvar replied dismissively. "They're hiding their valuable cargo ships because they know we can take them easily. This proves they understand their weakness." The first attack came without warning. The UHS Righteous Fury dropped out of hyperspace directly on top of the Vorthon patrol fleet guarding the outer system. The 5 Vorthon ships barely had time to register the human vessel's presence before it opened fire. But these weren't the limited weapons the Vorthons had seen at New Busan. The Righteous Fury's main guns could punch through a battleship's armor like it was tissue paper. Each shot contained enough energy to power a small city for a year. The first Vorthon ship exploded before its crew could even send a distress signal. The second managed to raise its shields, but they collapsed under the human assault within seconds. The third tried to run, but the human ship was faster than any merchant vessel had a right to be. Within 10 minutes, all 5 Vorthon ships were debris floating in space. Commander Jiwan studied the tactical display with cold satisfaction. "Any survivors?" "Negative, Commander. All enemy vessels completely destroyed." "Good. Signal the fleet. Phase 1 is complete. Moving to Phase 2. Phase 2 was the assault on the Kepler 442 station itself. The Righteous Fury was joined by 12 other ships that had once been disguised as civilian vessels. Together, they approached the heavily fortified Vorthon base. Sub-Commander Veltak was the first to see them on the station's sensors. At first, he thought it was a sensor malfunction. 13 ships approaching in perfect military formation, but the computer identified them as grain haulers, medical transports, and farming equipment suppliers. "War Prime," he called urgently. "We have incoming human vessels. But something is wrong with our identification systems. They're reading as civilian ships, but they're moving in attack formation." Thekvar looked at the display and laughed. "Desperate humans trying to threaten us with cargo ships. This will be amusing. Destroy them." The station's massive defense. Weapons opened fire. Energy beams that could vaporize a normal merchant ship struck the human vessels. But instead of exploding, the ship's military-grade shields absorbed the attacks with ease. Then the humans returned fire. Captain Omin Selk commanded the UHS Starbreaker, a ship that had spent 30 years disguised as a mining equipment transport. Its true purpose was far more sinister. The Starbreaker carried weapons designed to destabilize the cores of planets and turn moons into asteroid fields. "Target the asteroid base," Captain O ordered. "Full power to main weapon." The Starbreaker's primary weapon was something called a quantum destabilizer. It could tear apart the atomic bonds that held matter together. When it fired, the entire Vorthon station shuddered as its rocky shell began to crack. "Impossible," Sub-Commander Veltak whispered, watching his fortress crumble. "These are supposed to be merchant ships. How do they have weapons like this?" War Prime Thekvar finally understood that he had made a terrible mistake. These weren't desperate civilians trying to fight with cargo ships. These were human warships that had been hiding in plain sight for decades. "Send a distress signal to the home fleet," he ordered. "Tell them the humans have military capabilities far beyond what we estimated. Tell them—" His words were cut off as another quantum destabilizer blast tore through the station's command center. The massive asteroid that had housed thousands of Vorthon soldiers began breaking apart, its pieces spinning off into space. Within 2 hours, the Kepler 442 system was under complete human control. The orbital station was destroyed. The Vorthon fleet was debris. Every enemy installation in the system had been reduced to scrap metal and dust. But this was just the beginning. Captain Song Hyunwoo received his orders while his ship was still, disguised as a passenger liner. The message was encrypted and brief. "Proceed to Vorthon Sector 7. Eliminate all military assets. No survivors, no witnesses." His ship, the UHS Silent Thunder, had been carrying tourists and business travelers just 48 hours ago. Now it was configured as a stealth destroyer, nearly invisible to enemy sensors and armed with weapons that could kill from halfway across a solar system. The pattern repeated across Vorthon space. Human ships that had been masquerading as civilians for decades suddenly revealed themselves as instruments of war. They struck without warning, destroyed everything in sight, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. The Vorthons tried to fight back, but they were facing an enemy they didn't understand. Their intelligence had told them humans were peaceful farmers with minimal military capability. Instead, they found themselves battling a species that had hidden the most advanced war fleet in the galaxy behind a mask of merchant vessels and colony ships. Major Jung Taekwon led the ground assault on Vorthon Outpost 17, a military supply depot that had been thought impregnable. His force had arrived in what appeared to be civilian transport ships carrying farming colonists. But when the ships landed, armed soldiers poured out carrying weapons that could cut through Vorthon armor like butter. Resistance is stronger than expected, one of his sergeants reported. The Vorthans are fighting hard. They're fighting for their lives, Major Jung replied, but they picked the wrong species to terrorize. No mercy, no prisoners. Make sure none of them escape to warn the others. The assault lasted 3 hours. When it was over, Outpost 17 was a smoking ruin, and every Vorthan defender was dead. The humans had lost only 2 soldiers in the entire battle. As reports of these attacks reached the Vorthan High Command, panic began to spread. Fleet after fleet was being destroyed by ships that weren't supposed to exist. Military bases that had stood for centuries were being wiped out by forces that had appeared from nowhere. War Commander Zekmor, the Vorthan Supreme Military Leader, called an emergency meeting of the High Command. "What are we facing?" he demanded. "Our intelligence said the humans were weak, but they're destroying our fleets with ease." "The humans were never weak," replied Intelligence Chief Corvex, her voice shaking. "They were hiding. Every merchant ship, every passenger liner, every cargo hauler, they were all military vessels in disguise. We've been watching their fleet conduct trade missions for decades without realizing what we were seeing." "How many ships do they have?" "Unknown. Could be thousands. Could be tens of thousands. Every human vessel we've ever identified as civilian might actually be a warship." War Commander Zekmor felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold of space. The Vorthans had based their attack on the assumption that humans were a weak species focused on farming and trade. Now they were discovering that humanity had the largest hidden military force in the galaxy. "Send word to all remaining fleets," he ordered. "Full defensive positions, and someone get me a communication channel to the human government. We may need to negotiate." But it was already too late for negotiation. The human war machine was fully awake now, and it had tasted Vorthan blood. Across their territory, the predators were closing in on their prey. The Vorthans had wanted to show the galaxy what happened when you were weak. Instead, they had awakened, something that would show the galaxy what happened when you hurt human children. And the galaxy was about to learn why humanity had chosen to hide its true nature in the first place. 1 week after the attack on New Busan, the Altarian Council called an emergency session. The Great Assembly Hall on Altair Prime had not seen such urgency in over 2 centuries. Representatives from dozens of species filled the circular chamber, their voices creating a mixture of sounds that would have been chaos to human ears. Council Speaker Mordun, an ancient being whose species had been mediating galactic disputes for millennia, called for order. His 4 arms gestured for silence, as his translator prepared to address the assembled delegates. "We are here because of the conflict between the humans and the Vorthans," Mordun announced. "In 7 days, 17 Vorthan military installations have been completely destroyed. 43 Vorthan fleets have vanished without a trace. We estimate over 200,000 Vorthan military personnel are dead or missing." A ripple of shock went through the assembly. The Vorthans were known as one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. The idea that they could suffer such losses in a single week seemed impossible. "What of human losses?" asked Ambassador Kreval of the Cedian Alliance. "Unknown," Mordun replied. "Human military communications are completely encrypted. We have no reports of human ships being destroyed. None of their personnel have been confirmed killed. It appears the humans are winning this conflict decisively." "That cannot be correct," protested Trade Minister Vexhan of the Merchant Coalition. "The humans are farmers and traders. They have maybe a few hundred patrol ships at most. The Vorthans have thousands of warships. Had Mordun corrected grimly. Vorthon military strength appears to be declining rapidly. In the middle of this discussion, a human shuttle requested permission to land. Ambassador Han Seoyeon had arrived to address the council. She was a middle-aged woman with graying hair, known throughout the galaxy for her calm, diplomatic manner and skill at trade negotiations. The council had expected her to come begging for help, asking the galactic community to intervene and save humanity from Vorthan retaliation. Instead, she walked into the chamber with the confidence of someone who held all the advantages. "Honored Council," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the translator systems. "I come to inform you that humanity will not be accepting any ceasefire offers or peace negotiations regarding the current conflict with the Vorthon Empire." The chamber erupted in surprised chatter. Council Speaker Mordun raised his arms for quiet. "Ambassador Han," he said carefully, "surely you understand that continued warfare will only lead to greater losses for both sides. The Vorthons are a powerful military force. They have the capability to destroy human colonies across the galaxy." Ambassador Han smiled, and there was something in that expression that made several alien diplomats uncomfortable. "Honored Speaker, I think there has been a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of human civilization. For the past century, we have been content to let the galaxy see us as peaceful farmers and traders. This was not because we were incapable of anything else. It was because we chose to be something else." She activated a holographic projector, and images began filling the air above the assembly. The aliens watched in growing shock as human merchant ships transformed before their eyes, revealing massive weapon systems and military armor. Every human civilian vessel you have ever seen was designed with military conversion capability, Ambassador Han explained. "Our cargo ships are actually heavy cruisers. Our passenger liners are troop transports and carriers. Our mining vessels carry planet-cracking weapons. What you thought was our entire military force was actually just our patrol and customs service." The hologram showed more images. Human farming colonies revealing hidden defense systems, civilian factories converting to weapon production in a matter of hours, transport ships deploying armies of soldiers who had been disguised as colonists and workers. "This is impossible," whispered Trade Minister Vexhan. "We have trade agreements with humanity going back decades. We've inspected their ships, visited their colonies. They were always civilian installations." "They were civilian installations," Ambassador Han agreed. "But civilian and military are not mutually exclusive concepts for humans. Every farmer can be a soldier. Every merchant can be a warrior. Every parent will become a killer if you threaten their children." Council Speaker Mordun leaned forward in his chair. "Ambassador, are you saying that humanity has been maintaining a secret military force this entire time?" "Not secret," she replied. "Hidden in plain sight. Every human you have ever met who claimed to be a trader or farmer or engineer, they were telling the truth. But they were also trained soldiers, ready to fight if necessary. We simply hoped it would never be necessary." The truth was beginning to sink in among the alien delegates. Humanity had not been a peaceful species that learned to fight. They had been a warrior species that chose to build instead of destroy. "The Vorthans made a critical error," Ambassador Han continued. "They assumed that our peaceful behavior meant we were incapable of violence. They confused choice with ability. When they attacked New Busan, when they murdered our families and took our people prisoner, they crossed a line that we had hoped would never be crossed." Fleet Admiral Song Hyun-woo entered the chamber at that moment, still wearing his military uniform. The aliens had expected him to be commanding the human war effort from some distant battle station. Instead, he had come to address them directly. "I want to make something very clear to this council," Admiral Song said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who commanded planet-destroying weapons. "The current military action against the Vorthon Empire is not a war. Wars are fought between equals who have legitimate disagreements. This is an extermination." The word sent a chill through the chamber. Several alien delegates began speaking at once, but Admiral Song continued. "The Vorthons attacked human civilians. They murdered human children. They took human prisoners for torture and experimentation. These actions have moved them from the category of enemy to pest that must be eliminated. We will not stop until every Vorthon military asset is destroyed and their capacity to threaten human lives is permanently removed." "Admiral," Council Speaker Morden said carefully, "surely the Vorthons can be made to see reason. Perhaps reparations, territorial concessions." "No," Admiral Song replied flatly. "You don't negotiate with species that target children. You remove them from the equation." Ambassador Han activated another hologram, this one showing a tactical display of Vorthon space. Most of it was marked in red, destroyed or under human control. "In 7 days, we have eliminated 60% of Vorthon military capability," she announced. "Their remaining forces are trapped in 3 star systems and surrounded. We estimate complete military victory within another week." "And then what?" asked Ambassador Krevol. "You destroy their entire civilization." "Their civilization will continue," Ambassador Han replied. "Under permanent human supervision, the Vorthon people will be relocated to worlds where they can live peacefully under our protection. Their military capacity will be permanently eliminated. Their leaders will face justice for war crimes against human civilians." The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. Humanity was not just winning this conflict. They were demonstrating military capabilities that dwarfed anything the galaxy had previously seen. "How?" Trade Minister Vex Han asked quietly. "How did we not know? How did you hide military power on this scale?" Admiral Song exchanged a glance with Ambassador Han. "Because you assumed that peaceful behavior meant peaceful capability. You saw what you expected to see. A species that grew food, built homes, raised families. You never asked what we were capable of when those families were threatened. We have weapons in our inventory that we haven't used for 80 years, Admiral Song continued. Devices that can destabilize stars, turn gas giants into bombs, or freeze entire solar systems. We've never needed them because no one has been foolish enough to attack human civilians. Until now." The hologram changed to show new images. Human ships approaching the Vorthon home system. The fleet was massive. Thousands of vessels that had been masquerading as civilian ships across the galaxy. "The final phase begins tomorrow," Admiral Song announced. "The Vorthon homeworld will be surrounded and their government will surrender. Unconditionally. Their military will be dismantled permanently. Their capacity to wage war will be removed from the galaxy forever." Council Speaker Morden stood slowly. "Admiral, Ambassador, I must ask, what does this mean for the rest of us? If humanity has been hiding this level of military power, what assurance do we have that you won't use it against other species?" Ambassador Han looked around the chamber at the worried alien faces. "The same assurance you've had for the past century. We don't want to conquer the galaxy. We want to farm, trade, explore, and raise our families in peace. But if anyone else decides to test our resolve by attacking human civilians..." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "Well, The Vorthans are providing a very clear demonstration of what happens to species that make that choice. The message was received. Every alien delegate in the chamber understood that they had been sharing the galaxy with a sleeping giant for over a century. Most importantly, they understood that the giant was still willing to sleep, as long as no one else was foolish enough to wake it up. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Admiral Song had one final message for the Council. Tell every species in the galaxy what you have learned today. Humans are not farmers who learned to fight. We are fighters who chose to farm. We prefer building to destroying, creating to killing. But we are very, very good at both. The choice of which we do, that has always been up to you. The chamber remained silent long after the humans had gone. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. 2 weeks after the attack on New Busan, the Vorthon Empire ceased to exist. War Commander Zekmor stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching human ships surround the Vorthon home world. There were thousands of them, arranged in perfect formations that spoke of military precision honed over centuries. Each ship was larger and more heavily armed than anything in the Vorthon fleet. "How many do you count?" he asked his tactical officer. "Over 8,000, War Commander, and more arriving every hour." Zekmor closed his eyes. 2 weeks ago, the Vorthons had been the dominant military power in this sector of the galaxy. Their empire had spanned dozens of star systems. Their fleets had been feared across known space. Now their fleets were debris. Their military stations were ash. Their colonies had surrendered without firing a shot rather than face the terrible efficiency of human warfare. "Incoming transmission from the human fleet," his communications officer announced. "Put it through." The main screen activated, showing the face of Fleet Admiral Song Hyunwoo. The human looked tired but determined, like someone finishing a distasteful but necessary job. "War Commander Zekmor," Admiral Song said without preamble, "I am here to accept your unconditional surrender. And if I refuse?" Admiral Song's expression didn't change. "Then, in 6 hours, your homeworld will be uninhabitable for the next 1,000 years. Your people will be scattered across the galaxy as refugees. Your species will be remembered only as an example of what happens when someone attacks human families." Zekmor looked around his bridge at his remaining officers. These were proud warriors who had served the Vorthon Empire their entire lives. Now they were defeated, surrounded, and facing an enemy they had never truly understood. "What are your terms?" he asked. "Complete dismantlement of all Vorthon military forces. Your people will be relocated to 3 worlds under permanent human supervision. All Vorthon leaders responsible for the attack on New Busan will face trial for war crimes. Your species will never again possess the capability to wage interstellar war. And if we agree, your people live, your culture continues, your children grow up safely under human protection. You become a peaceful species, whether you want to or not." Zekmor was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke the words that officially ended the Vorthon Empire. "We accept your terms." On the human flagship, Admiral Song turned to his communications. "Officer, signal all ships. The Vorthons have surrendered. Begin occupation procedures." Dr. Yuna stood in the medical bay of the rescue ship, watching as the last survivors from New Busan were brought aboard. After 2 weeks of Vorthon captivity, they were thin, traumatized, but alive. The aliens had kept them as leverage, not understanding that taking human prisoners had only made humanity's response more brutal. Among the survivors was young Choi Dae-ho, still clutching the farming tool his father had given him for his 10th birthday. The boy had grown thin during his imprisonment, but his eyes held a strength that reminded Yuna of his father. "Dr. Yuna," he said quietly when he saw her. "Are we going home?" She knelt down beside him. "New Busan is gone, Dae-ho. But we're going to build you a new home, a better one. And this time, nobody will ever be able to hurt you there." The boy nodded solemnly. "Will there be farms? Dad said I should grow things instead of destroying them." "Yes," she promised. "There will be farms, and schools, and birthday parties, everything that makes a place worth living in." War Prime Thekvar, the Vorthan commander who had led the attack on New Busan, was brought to a human military tribunal 3 days later. The courtroom was simple and plain, nothing like the grand chambers where Vorthan justice was dispensed. Dr. Yuna sat in the witness section, having been asked to represent the survivors. Across from her, Thekvar looked smaller than she remembered. Without his army and his weapons, he was just another prisoner facing judgment. The human judge, Colonel Park Min-jae, read the charges in a calm, steady voice. War crimes against civilian populations, murder of non-combatants, torture of prisoners, crimes against sentient species. Thekvar's translator device rendered his words into human language. "I was following the laws of war as understood by my people. The strong dominate the weak. This is the natural order." "The natural order," Colonel Park repeated. "Tell me, War Prime, what do you think of the natural order now?" Thekvar had no answer. Dr. Yuna was called to give testimony about the attack and the treatment of the prisoners. As she spoke, describing the systematic murder of civilians and the targeting of children, Thekvar's confidence continued to crumble. "Why did you target the civilian areas?" the prosecutor asked. "To break their spirit," Thekvar replied through his translator. "Humans fight with emotion instead of logic. We believed that harming their families would force quick surrender. And now?" Thekvar looked around the courtroom, seeing human faces that showed no emotion, except cold determination. "Now I understand that harming human families does not break their spirit. It removes their restraint." The trial lasted 3 days. The verdict was unanimous, guilty on all charges. The sentence was life imprisonment on a human penal colony, where Thekvar would spend the rest of his days growing food for the families of his victims. He would learn, the judge explained, the difference between building and destroying. The new colony world was called New Seoul, and it was everything that New Busan had been, but better. The houses were stronger, the farms more productive, the schools larger and brighter. Most importantly, it was protected by defense systems that could obliterate an attacking fleet before it reached the outer planets. Dae-ho, now 11 years old, planted the first tree in the central square. It was a sapling grown from seeds recovered from Park Hae-jin's orchard, one of the few things that had survived the attack on New Busan. Dr. Yuna, who had been appointed as the colony's administrator, watched as the boy carefully placed the small tree in the ground. Around them, hundreds of families were building new homes, starting new farms, creating new lives from the ashes of their old ones. "What should we call it?" she asked the boy. Dae-ho thought for a moment, remembering the old man who had died protecting children in his orchard. "Hae-jin's tree," he said, "so people remember that some things are worth dying for." Captain Min-ho, recovered from his injuries and promoted to colonel, stood at the edge of the ceremony with the other military personnel who had survived the attack. Above them, barely visible in the daytime sky, were the shapes of human warships, maintaining their eternal patrol. "Do you think they'll try again?" asked Sergeant Park, who now wore the insignia of a lieutenant. "Someone might," Minho replied. "But they'll have seen what happened to the Vorthons. Most species aren't that stupid. And if they are—" Minho looked up at the patrol ships, then at the families building their new homes below. "Then they'll learn the same lesson. We're not farmers who learn to fight. We're fighters who chose to farm, but we're still very good at both." Across the galaxy, the story of humanity's response to the Vorthon attack spread like wildfire. Trade agreements were honored more carefully. Shipping routes that passed through human space saw increased traffic as other species sought the protection of human patrol ships. Diplomatic relations improved as alien governments realized the value of staying on humanity's good side. The Setian Alliance sent an official apology for ever doubting human military capability, along with a request for mutual defense agreements. The Merchant Coalition offered exclusive trading rights in exchange for protection of their shipping lanes. Even the proud Altarian Council asked for human military advisors to help plan their defense strategies. But perhaps the most telling response came from the Rigelian Empire, humanity's nearest neighbors. Their ambassador arrived at Earth with a simple message. "We have 300 worlds full of families and children. We would very much like to remain your friends." President Jin Yunji received the ambassador in the same office where she had authorized the activation of Broken Arrow. But now the mood was different. The emergency was over. The sleeping giant could return to sleep. "Of course you remain our friends," she told the Rigelian ambassador. "We never wanted to be anyone's enemy. We just wanted to live in peace." "And now?" President Jin smiled, but there was steel behind it. "Now everyone knows the price of disturbing that peace. We hope no one else will be foolish enough to pay it." In the months that followed, human space became the safest region of the galaxy. Pirates avoided it entirely. Aggressive species gave it a wide berth. Trade flowed freely under the protection of ships that could level planets, but chose instead to escort grain transports and medical supplies. The transformation back to civilian life was as swift as the conversion to war had been. Weapons were stored away. Warships resumed their disguises as merchant vessels. Soldiers went back to being farmers, teachers, and engineers. But everyone remembered. The galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their numbers. It was their capacity to choose mercy and their ability to choose otherwise. On New Sol, as the sun set over the growing colony, young Dai-Ho sat beside Heijun's tree and carefully tended its roots. Above him, patrol ships traced silent paths across the stars, watching over sleeping families and growing dreams. The boy had learned that some things were worth destroying for. But more importantly, he had learned that some things were worth building. And sometimes, the best way to protect what you build is to make sure everyone knows what happens to those who try to tear it down. The sleeping giant had returned to sleep, but the galaxy would never forget what it looked like when it was awake.